everyone. Welcome back to the Excelcast. I'm your host, Joe Parker, and today I have a guest who I played football with in high school. He has a bachelor's in exercise science. He's a certified personal trainer at Crunch Fitness, going for his physical therapy degree, and he's won two USBF championships in 2022. And his name is Zack Venios. Zach, how you doing today, man?
Pretty good. How about yourself? It's a hell of an
Doing amazing.
introduction.
Doing
Really appreciate
amazing,
it.
man. Yeah, you got a lot of stuff going on, man. A lot of things that you're working toward, and you chose diligence today. So why is diligence the word that you want to, surround yourself with and you want to talk about?
So I chose diligence because it is a thoughtful persistence. It's beyond just being, having a stubborn willpower. It's being able to create a plan, consider all the variables that might take place within it, and then seeing that plan through without deviating from it. And then, once you get to the outcome, it's all about looking at what went well and then looking at the things that went negative, reevaluating, and then, just rinsing and repeating, making sure that you don't make those same mistakes twice. It's having, a reason for why everything is put in place.
And I think that's a lot of things, like having a purpose, having a reason for why you're doing what you're doing. And when you connect that with actual action, that's where diligence and discipline come into play with, trying to achieve whatever you're trying to achieve. So I think that's a great word. And it really speaks to who you are, being a bodybuilder and also being a personal trainer. So tell us a little bit about training and how that is for you, being a personal trainer at Crunch.
Yeah, I mean, I love training. So I've been doing it for about the last year and a half, formally at Crunch. Doing it on the side here and there for close people in my life. But um, that I just, especially coming from a fitness background ever since I've been in middle school, I've always been fascinated, self-educating, basically ever since I got into it, and now I get to you know there's plenty of things that have worked for me along my way, but it's cool to be able to see how differently things can play out for other people, trying to create programs, workouts based on their lifestyle and their behaviors. And it can be totally not opposite, but very different from what I do. So it's cool to see that all play out.
That's awesome, man. So, any experiences as a personal trainer that really stick out to you that, have been impactful along your journey?
So as much as I'm a super nerd for the X's and O's of, exercise science, nutrition, it's really the changes that clients will report to me that take place outside of the gym that, make their quality of life better. Things like being able to go out and garden and not having to be carried back into the house on a stretcher. Being able to play with their grandkids without throwing their lower back out, being able to wean off, blood pressure medications, depression medications, all that stuff. Um, I can keep up with my wife on a 2 mile walk now and not have to stop short because I'm, out of breath. It's all those things that really, resonate with me, and it's why probably, part of the reason why I'm going down also the path of getting my doctorate in physical therapy too, because I mean that's really the entire change you're looking to see with that. And why I'll always, no matter how in depth I get into physical therapy in the future, I'll always be training to some capacity, even if it's just one or two people here and there. So that's what really gets me.
That's awesome, man. I mean, the impact that exercising your physical body and going to the gym and just making yourself feel better about yourself and about the accomplishments that you can accomplish outside of the gym just because of the accomplishments that you accomplish inside of the gym. I mean, I think not a lot of people really think about, when you PR. I mean, when I PR, I feel fantastic. I feel like, oh, I just leveled up myself physically. I can level up myself mentally because yesterday I didn't think I was here. So you could do the same thing when it comes to, your mental headspace, your career, your profession, whatever it may be. And I feel like it really starts in the gym. And that's something that when you discover and you find that out, it's really key to unlocking your fullest potential in other aspects of your life. So what you're doing is you're actually giving people this, like, even mental, emotional, career. You're the starting point for the compounding of success throughout people's lives. So you play a really key role in that. And I think it's great that you really find love in helping other people.
Yeah, and I always, try and make it a point to make it clear to a client that might be new that, we're only in the gym together for anywhere from 30 to an hour and a half throughout the entire week. You have so many more hours of the day that affect your physical and mental well-being. So I always make sure to, make it a point to look for opportunities outside of the gym
Mm.
to, as you said, level up yourself.
Dude, absolutely. And speaking of leveling up yourself, you started out playing football, lifting here and there, but then became a personal trainer and then said, I'm going to take it even a step further. I'm going to become a bodybuilder. So, how did that translate and correlate into you becoming a bodybuilder?
So, yeah, so it started back in high school. I joined the football team like my sophomore year. I played a little bit growing up, but not really. It's, you're a 120-pound kid at that point. It's not football in high school. So basically, I was like 180 pounds going into it, and my main goal at the time was to get better, but I also knew I had to get bigger and stronger if I wasn't going to get the total shit kicked out of me by Joe and the rest of the O linemen while I was playing scout defense. So that was where it really got serious. And then after high school, I didn't play any sports in college. I got into the DPT program, which is an accelerated program. So I kind of pulled sports back and then just focused strictly on academics for first 3 years of college. But I'm a progress oriented person. I really like to, once I do one thing, I'm always completing it, worrying about the next thing, and just keep on trying to level up. So it got to a point where I realized that that was my only adversity at that time, those first 3 years of college where I was only doing school. And then around that time, this was the summer of 2021. My younger brother had done a bodybuilding show for the past, ever since COVID. We had started following professional bodybuilding, really digging deep into the sports science, the physiology, and, just self-educating a ton throughout that time. So, and at the time I was already basically bodybuilding. I was, training like a bodybuilder, eating the meals like a bodybuilder, just basically living the lifestyle. But I didn't have any intention of competing. But once he did his show, I got asked enough times if, are you going to do one? When are you going to do one? And for a while, I was just like, it's not really my thing, just looking at it. Just because, most bodybuilders will tell you this. They get into competing because they love to train. You don't like see them on a stage and go, oh, I want to do that, so I want to get into training. It's always backwards. So, and one thing too, why I didn't, I wasn't excited or eager to jump into it right away is because, you're on a stage in a banana hammock. So it's one of those things where if you do it and try and you suck, it can be a really bad look. And if you do it and do great, it can be a good look. So that was also one of the things. But eventually I got to a point where it's like, okay, I really want to do something more challenging that provides more adversity than what the past 2 or 3 years has given me. So after looking at my brother laying on the couch like a week out, just totally body's completely dead still, death face, I couldn't imagine not experiencing what that feels like at some point. So I jumped into it, really ramped it up, did like a 5-month bulk going into 2022, and January 1st, 2022 is when I started that whole year of prepping and competing.
That's awesome, man. And you spoke to self-education in there. You and your brother, you guys were just self-educating yourself. And I really feel like that's the point where you know that you found a calling, in a sense, or a purpose. Because if you're taking time out of your day outside of work, outside of schooling, trying to become a physical therapist, and you're still like, hey, like I want to do this. These are the things that I'm studying, I'm looking at for me. That's when you found something that you're really being called to. And I think that's great that you guys did that. And, you sitting there going, oh, maybe it's not my thing. Maybe it's not something I want to do. You were studying it though. It was something that, even though you may not have wanted to admit it to yourself at the time, you were about it and you loved that lifestyle because outside of what you were doing, you were still going at it, still studying it, and still looking at it.
Yeah, yeah. It's it's definitely funny how it all happened. Like I'm not kidding. Like that summer when he did his, I was so against doing it myself. I'm just like I'm just passionate about learning what goes into it. I don't really want to take it to that level, but that just kind of, it was one of those things where I just kind of threw my hat in the ring, screw it, see what happens, and kind of fell in love with the process along the way.
Yeah, and you were kind of good at the process too, dude. You have two USBF championships. I mean,
Yeah,
back to back.
yeah. So I didn't do that by myself though. Like I said, my brother and
Yeah.
I we were in the mix together. So the way we kind of do it is if he's in prep, we talked about creating the plan in the beginning of this. He's mapping out his plan, making all the considerations as to what might affect the outcome. But I'm like kind of the second set of eyes because once you get halfway through a prep, you're in the latter half of it. You're really dieted down, depleted. You're not making the most rational decisions or the ones that might be the most safe towards the outcome. Like me for example, I might look at my check-ins every week and be like, a little bit came off, but I'm feeling good right now. So I really feel like I could push it a little bit harder this week. Drop more calories, add more cardio, whatever. Um, but that's right now. A diligence oriented person needs to be able to see how your decisions now might affect outcomes a week from now, months from now, a year down the line, whatever it might be. So you need that person looking over you at least to see that end in sight because you're the one in the maze. You can't see that far ahead. You need somebody outside of the maze that can really visualize how it all might look at the end.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. And dude, just having the maturity to be like, hey, I can't see everything. And I know that I'm going to need someone who's going to be that second set of eyes, like you said. I believe that that's part of diligence. You're saying, like, hey, like the purpose is for me to be ready in weeks, not right now. So if I know I get lost in that maze sometimes, I need someone right next to me to be like, hey, like you need to relax a little bit. You have this much further to go. Let me talk some sense into you because when you get so narrow focused and narrow minded, sometimes you get that tunnel vision, and that tunnel vision can, to some degree, wear you out if you don't have that person to lean on like you do.
yeah, I'm sure you've seen that all the time in playing football through high school and college, seeing teammates can get heated sometimes, and you just need to have that come to Jesus moment where it's like, okay, if we keep just headstrong going at this thing without taking a step back, you're gonna just dig yourself into a deeper hole, and it's gonna be really tough to get out of. So you need to be able to have that holistic viewpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. And what does like a typical prep week look like for you? Or I guess we could talk about your a little bit before peak week, and then if you want to get into peak week, and then after that, leading up to the competition, what's your mindset like? What are you doing on a daily basis? Things like that.
So typical contest preps, people, depending on what your body composition is like going into it, how lean you are, people do anywhere from 12 even up to 25 weeks of prep. Um, and the name of the game is fat loss. So you're going to be cutting your calories significantly from what you were in an off season. Um, for the first half, it's honestly, it's not bad at all. Especially, your body fat's at a point where you have energy reserves on your body. You're not, yeah, you're eating less food, but you're not in starvation mode yet. So it's really smooth sailing the first half. Once you get halfway through, you start to feel the the struggles outside of the gym. Your body is really good at it knows what your mind wants. It'll conserve energy for your training sessions, which is always the number one priority in a prep. No matter how much cardio you're doing or how much less food you're eating, if it's at a serious cost of your training, that's when you're in the red zone and you're going to see muscle loss. You're just going to start to become a smaller version of yourself. So always keeping that a priority. Halfway through is when you have that energy for training, but just getting up, you start to feel getting up out of a chair, you know, doing all these little physical tasks throughout the day. Just it starts to weigh on you a little bit, which is kind of cool at first. You're like, oh yeah, like something is happening right now. But then once you get really close to the show, 2 weeks out, it's like, oh my gosh, like I remember sitting in. We have these 3-hour labs for when we learn our PT techniques. So we would get up from our seats, go to the front, learn a couple techniques, come back, practice them, and it's repeatedly doing that throughout the whole 3-hour session. So maybe like 7-8 times, and it's something that's supposed to be easy. It's really supposed to be easy, but I remember just every time, just really just slowly getting up from my seat, just groaning, walking to the front of the room, walking back, because my body's trying to conserve energy at that point because it knows I need it for training, which I'm, in a prep, training is a different animal. That's really the number one reason why I wanted to do a prep in the first place. I wanted to know what it felt like to run on fumes and still train as if I'm, on off-season calories. So that's what you're feeling 2-3 weeks out. 2 weeks out is usually the hardest week because that is when you're still expected to train hard as usual, and that's when your food is lowest. And then and around that time too, that's when you start setting up for peak week. So during that time is when you're starting to deplete carbohydrates. You're pounding a ton of water. Like I think I was at 7 to 8 liters of fluids, generally including everything else per day. That's
And
setting up for
how much water is that in gallons? Because honestly, I don't know how to measure liters if I'm being real.
it's
Roughly.
it's like around 2-ish gallons of fluid.
Okay. Okay.
So maybe eight is like the peak I was hitting. I would say maybe like high 6s actually to mid 7 liters is what I was doing.
Okay.
And then that sets up for peak week next week. So peak week, generally, you're trying to set yourself up to look your best on, usually it's a Saturday show day, your best for one day. And you do that by, there's definitely different peaking strategies. The one I know of most and the one I used is carb loading towards the end of the week. And the reason why you start drinking all that water the week before is because you're trying to alter these pathways you have in your kidneys that promote fluid retention or excretion. So by drinking a ton of water, you're manipulating those pathways to excrete fluid because you have too much in your system. So once you get towards the end of the last week, so this is like 1 day before the show, you've already had a ton of carbohydrates to your muscle stores carbohydrates as an energy reserve, and those carbohydrates also pull water into the muscle. So picture like a water balloon. That's what your muscle is like. And then you have water between the muscle and the skin. The objective on show day is to get the muscle filled up as much as you can and have as little water between the skin and the muscle as possible. So like this paper skin like thing. Yep. So you're creating an illusion. You're really small, but in reality, you're really small, but it makes you look really big, when you're on stage with the light on you and everything. So, 1 or 2 days before, then you pull sodium out. And what that does is that is what is going to pull the water out from between the muscle and the skin. So, you get better with this as you do more and more shows. My brother and I hit it right on the head the first show, and it went really well. So, meaning by cutting sodium, pulled the right amount of water out to where I didn't also pull water out of the muscle, which creates this really flat look. There's two really bad outcomes that can happen with peaking is you spill over, meaning you do too much water, sodium, carbohydrates. So you just kind of look bloated. And then it is doing too much, pulling too much out, and you're left with like this flat, shriveled up look. So the first show I hit it right on the head. The second one, so that was in April. And then the second one later in the year, like I said, I always progress oriented, want more and more. So after the first show, the judging feedback they gave me was like, you were, pretty in shape, good enough to win an amateur show. You're just going to need to bring it even a little bit tighter to, do well at the pro level. So, as soon as you tell me that, I'm like, I'm not even worrying about what just happened. After the show, I was already thinking about the one in October, which is, kind of a detriment, to be honest. So the one in October, I chased a little bit too much and bit off too much I can chew. So not quite the look I was going for, but thankfully still good enough to get the outcome I wanted. But it's all about going back to the drawing board at the end of the day, making sure I don't do that again.
Absolutely. I feel like, sometimes when we're really excited for something, we get really caught up in it. And that's what happened. You went from one show to the other show rather than taking that time to self-reflect and really write down and be like, okay, like what should I be doing here? What's the outcome? And but it's a learning lesson, bro. And you still won. You still won a pro show, your second time around. So
yeah, and it's like when I say, it didn't go as well as I wanted, these are, minuscule differences that's only somebody who's as knee deep in the process as I am. I'm going to see those changes. Other people might not, but I know, and nobody's going to beat themselves up than me for it. Even my brother was trying to be like, no, it's fine. Even though he's the first person that'll tell me of something if I'm really messing up. So I'm glad the experience happened because, it's not so much a loss. It's just a lesson learned.
Absolutely, man. Just it really speaks to the word that you chose, like diligence. You know what I mean? Being able to just have a plan, have a purpose, and move forward with action constantly. I feel like because you embody that, and because that is who you are, you could do what you did. Turn around in what was it, 6 months, and do a pro show.
It was so. I think I started in July prepping for the October show. So I think combined for the year it was 28 to 30 weeks.
Okay.
I think it was 29.
Okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, just being able to turn it around like that. You can't do that unless you are focused and you take action every day in the right direction, in the right step. Yeah, trust me, it's something that is, to an extent, it's something that you need to access. You need to consciously access that. You can't just be like, oh, I'm going to bodybuild and then not take all the proper steps in the proper way, in the proper form to do it.
Yeah, during a prep, there's three things that are non-negotiable. It's getting the training sessions in, getting the meals in at around the most consistent times as you can, and then sleep. Those three things during a prep are just non-negotiable. So you have to, whatever you have going on throughout your day, whatever your schedule was before, you have to somehow, rework your approach to be able to keep those three things a priority. Studying was one big thing. Getting my work in for school was something that I had to change because I was doing most of my studying later in the day, closer to nighttime. But, during a prep after like 5, 6 p.m., I'm worthless. I'm pretty much spent for the day. And then I have to make sure I can wind down in time to go to sleep at night. So what I was doing was, actively learning during lecture, doing my study guides during lecture, printing out the study guides so that I could do them at like 5, 6 in the morning when I'm on cardio. Or, because of COVID, we have pre-recorded virtual lectures. So on my commute to school, that's when I was listening to those too. So I was really trying to micromanage every hour of the day in order to be able to keep those three things in line the entire time.
Dude, that's awesome. Just being able to adapt and overcome based on your schedule and based on the incredible workload that you have, being a physical therapy student. I think that, you're excelling in every part of your life. And, having someone like your brother too to always be there right by your side to help you with something that you want to achieve is key, man. You got to have people around you that want the best for you. And, you know, keeping that in mind that those people do want the best for you, even though, sometimes you may be a little hard on yourself. But, you know, I think that having your priorities in line and having your priorities straight is always having your priorities straight is always good. But, you know, definitely need to take time for you and see where you messed up and see where it's okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, and being
How's
able
that?
to,
You don't know what I mean.
I know what you mean. I just know I suck at it.
No, yeah, there you
That's
go. There you go.
lear- learning to pull back and detach at times is something that I struggle with right now.
Yeah.
Was way worse with it last year. That's why my look for the end of the second show sucked, because I
Mm.
was a cortisol bucket the entire prep. Um, like, not only was I trying to do more with my ability to be a bodybuilder, like I was always also trying to be a better student, better trainer, all at the same time. I'm doing all these things. I started doing social media, started getting coaching stuff ready for whenever I went to do it in the future. I'm doing all these things, and then from 5 to 8, 9 o'clock, I'm just going and shallow breathing all day. So at the end of that second prep, I really was like, okay, I need to start learning how to, do all these things at once, live in the fire, but be able to detach and not, I guess, not be so fight or flight all day, because that really, was a detriment to my look at the end. We need stress in order to make us to be able to do stuff. But too much stress, just like anything, is very bad, and especially for body composition. Building muscle, losing body fat. High amounts of stress will definitely slow those processes down, or even cause you to work backwards. So,
Yeah, absolutely, man. And speaking on stress, going to the opposite of stress, I guess, or dopamine exposure. Saving dopamine was something that we talked about that you said you wanted to mention. And, saving dopamine and cold exposure are two things that, I've really been interested in lately. So if you could kind of dive into like dopamine and saving dopamine and then cold exposure and what effect that has on you, when it comes to dopamine as well.
so as a bodybuilder, somebody who specializes in hypertrophy training, which that's just the sciencey word for muscle building, cold exposure may not be the best method of doing this if that is your absolute number one goal. You're hyper focused on getting as much hypertrophy as you possibly can, because cold exposure will, blunt the inflammatory healing response that's necessary for, tissue healing, muscle. Um, but that's if you're using it chronically. That's not to say it's not a lever you can pull if maybe you're somebody who, really struggles with stress. So, like I was just talking about me, I'm a perfect candidate for this. And this is something I have done, towards the end of a prep with this, every things that are supposed to be easy throughout your day are just, for some reason, they're just feeling stressful and hard. You just go to sit down after a long day of work, you just sit down and your dog walks up to the door because it wants out. And, when I catch myself getting those moves where I'm just like, why are you there? Like right now, I just get used to that. I just sat down here. So
Yeah.
when I start getting like that, that's when I look for these levers to pull. It's like, okay, I need to do something that can, really bring my stress levels back down. Something that actually gives me a dopamine hit from something that is actually hard.
Yeah.
So I don't use cold exposure too often, but I do it when I get in those situations. Or, I was just watching the quarterback documentary. Kirk Cousins was doing it. He was like, if it's only week 3 or week 4, he's getting the total shit beat out of him every week. I think he was leading the
Yeah.
league in QB hits at the time. And then so he starts doing cold exposure because his body is under an extreme amount of stress. his joints every week are just so beat up because he takes like 30 hits a game. Um, that's a time where it's like, okay, I need to do something. I need levers to pull to sort of delay these stress responses. Um, you could do this through, caffeine intake. What I do, like during my off season, like right now, I'm keeping my caffeine to a low, just because I know I'm going to get to a point where maybe I'm towards the end of a training cycle, like 4 or 5 weeks in. I'm just really getting to a point where training's really hard. Things outside of the gym start to feel really hard. So that's when I save extra caffeine intake for those times. That's a lever I pull. Um, bangers on the gym playlist. I'm not exhausting those every workout because I'm trying to get some dopamine hit. That's a lever that I save for when I need it. So it's kind of using them as little tools along the way to sort of mitigate stress and help you propel yourself forward.
That's very interesting. Because I've, especially with the music, because I've noticed whenever I'm at the gym, I have a workout playlist, right? And
Mm-hmm.
if I don't add to that playlist, or if I don't switch that playlist up, it gets to a point where I'm like, what am I doing here at the
Yeah.
gym? You know what I mean? I start thinking about like, oh, later I got to do this and later I got to do that because I'm not zoned in, I'm not focused because I'm not listening to different music. And I've always felt that, but you really just put that into words. And maybe that's something that someone needs to hear. Like if they're tired of the gym or they're like, oh, I don't want to go. Maybe you just need some new music. Just switch it up. Just grab a new playlist or something like that. So yeah, that's a great point. It's something I never thought about like that.
Yeah. So like in my training, uh, I do anywhere from a 4 to 6 week hypertrophy block. By the end of that, like I'm really in and out of the gym. Just everything stresses me out. So I have these checks and balances in place. So 4 to 5, 6 weeks of hard training. Then I do a whole week where I'm really pulling back, and I'm pulling back on everything. Like I'm doing 2 BS pump workouts that whole week. Um, I'm not listening to any hype music during that time. I'm really pulling back caffeine intake. Letting all these levers come back to rest so that I can use them again in the future. So that's one way I have of detaching and really taking one step back, or it's not even a step back at times. It's just kind of staying where you are, and it increases your ability to take so many more steps forward.
That's awesome, man. That's something that I've noticed and I've done it, but I haven't put it into practice. Like I haven't been like, okay, I'm getting to this point now. I need to do this. It's just kind of something that I naturally was just like, oh, like I don't want to have coffee today, And then I'm like, oh wow, like that was not a good day. Like I'm gonna have coffee tomorrow. It was never
Yeah.
like, oh, this is why I need to stop drinking coffee for a day or not have less caffeine today or, switch up my playlist or cold exposure was getting to the point for me. I was doing it a lot because I thought, oh, it's always good for you. Then I was like, I don't want to take a shower right now because I don't. It's just
Dude.
repetitive cold every morning. I mean, obviously I did, but now I do like if it's right after training, I do like a warmish, like not like hot shower, but like a warmish room temperature shower, and then
Yeah.
I'll do cold in the morning to wake me up a little bit. So I kind of got to the point where I just kind of felt it out, but you had the science behind it, so you could really put it into words and articulate it well. And yeah, I really think that's going to be some good information for a lot of people out there listening, man. And speaking of information for people out there listening, do you have any tips for people that are just trying to get into shape or just they need something, they need to do something, right, with their life and not with their life, but with their athletic life, their exercise life. Do you have any tips getting started or if they feel like they're doing something that's not right, what they can do to, be more focused or be better at, exercising?
Yeah, so I would say the biggest thing, number one, is recognizing where you're at in that current moment, and that can be very tough. You need somebody to be that second set of eyes sometimes. So that's one perk of at least getting it started with a trainer, somebody that can see where you're at, and then letting you know where you need to go from there. And then, so once you recognize where you're at, don't throw the whole kitchen sink at yourself. Um, if you're trying to get to a destination, I like to use the supercar analogy. You have a Honda Accord and a Lamborghini. In theory, on paper, the Lamborghini is going to get you there faster. This is the perfect macro split. This is doing all the barbell lifts. But if you're not comfortable driving that Lamborghini, you're probably going to freeze at the wheel and crash and burn at some point. So you're better off just getting in the Accord, even though it doesn't go as fast. It might get you to that destination sooner. So definitely not just doing what, social media is big. You might have an influencer that you really admire and sort of see the things they're doing and, kind of gravitate towards. But they didn't just start there. That's the thing about exercise. It's, there's a misconception that the harder you go, the more you beat your body up, the more results you're going to get. And that's not always the case. Actually, most cases it's not, because, body composition gains, building muscle, losing body fat, these are all adaptations to a stimulus that you give your body. And, if you give your body more than what it can handle, like well over more than what it can handle, it's not going to adapt. It's going to try and pull you back to what the homeostasis was. Your body likes being in homeostasis. So it has plenty of mechanisms to work against you and actually cause you to work backwards. Even though you feel like you're putting in all this hard work and effort, sometimes that's not always the best. That's not always the most optimal pursuit. Metabolic adaptation is one form where this takes place. So take the person who, when they get on a kick to lose weight, they start doing a ton of cardio and eat no food. Well, that's a lot more than what the body can handle from where they started from. So what it'll do is it will work against them. You might adapt a little bit at first, but it'll get to a point where, you're going to lose a ton of weight and just become a smaller version of yourself. Yeah. And that works because, muscle is a large contributor to our resting metabolic rate. And the resting metabolic rate is the majority of the calories you burn in a day. So if you're going to be that person and feed your body, you're not giving it the nutrients it needs and you're asking it to do all this activity, what it's going to do is, especially if your choice of exercise is, just tanking yourself on a cardio machine, you're telling your body that it doesn't need muscle mass, it doesn't need to be strong, and you're not giving it the nutrients it needs to fuel muscle mass anyway. So it'll pull down your muscle mass and therefore your metabolism. And you get to a point where your furnace only burns when you're feeding it fuel, when you're doing exercise. You know what I mean? So when you're not exercising, then your body is really, really making sure that it's not burning calories because it has to conserve all that energy for that task that you're asking it to do. So that's like one form of metabolic adaptation. That's what I mean by your body working against you.
Okay. Yeah, because I have a scale right now that tells me my BMR, and it also tells me like my muscle mass, my body fat percentage. But to be honest with you, I don't think it's that accurate. So whenever I'm in the area, I'm gonna have to come and see you and really get, because you guys do body composition, right?
Yeah, we have a DEXA scan at the gym.
Okay. Yeah, because I don't think my $20 scale is doing it for me at all. I don't think that's too accurate.
Probably not, but it's at least giving you a reference as to where you were before. It's probably precise. It's probably precise in its measurements, but not accurate. If that makes sense.
So yeah.
So like,
explain. Yeah.
So like you measure it, it tells you you're 25% body fat. You might actually be 20, but the point is you can measure the difference accurately. So that if it tells you a year later you're 20%, that 5% difference is probably an accurate measurement of what you've lost. But you still might not be 20%. That's not really important anyways when you're tracking difference.
Yeah.
And all these machines, DEXA scan, your scale, they all have a percent error. Yeah, it's not that big of a deal at the end of the day. The importance is the difference.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry, my bad. You go.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
No. So we were on the topic of tips for getting in shape. This is also one of the biggest ones too, I just remembered it off the top of my head, is being progress oriented and not outcome oriented. So you can relate to this very well.
Mm-hmm.
For anybody who doesn't know, Joe lost over 100 pounds in the span of a year. What are the specifics? The numbers?
No, the 125 in 6 months and 21 days.
Yeah.
So
So imagine.
I was definitely probably on a higher spectrum of what you were talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm.
I was just itching to get the weight off of me though. You know what I mean? Like definitely probably wasn't the best route when it came to wearing myself out. I was at the point where people would try to like talk to me. I'd be like, nope, don't talk to me right now because I have more energy. I did it all this morning. Sorry. But I'm definitely healthier right now than where I was at, 2 years ago, year and a half ago. So I'm glad I did it. But looking back on it, it could have been achieved in a healthier manner. But I definitely had the drive and the determination to get it off. And that was key to where I'm at now. So, you know, still a blessing.
Yeah, and I don't think, you might be harder on yourself, of course, but the point is you're really happy now, and the weight has stayed off. That's how for the most part, you did everything right and it worked. It doesn't
Yeah.
work if it comes back on, but you're a good example because you spent all that time doing it. Imagine if you only cared about the outcome at the end, hitting whatever
Mm.
goal weight you had.
Mhm.
You, you'd be miserable that whole time. And then by the time you get to that end goal, you're going to be, it's like a very short-lived gratification.
Yeah,
So you do
because
all
the whole
that for
time
that.
you're thinking about it the whole time, right? And my sister once said to me, like, hey, like if you talk about things like they're already happening and you think about things like they're already happening, you're hitting a dopamine response for something that's not true. So it gets to the point where it gets old even when it does happen. So like try
Yeah,
to speak
like
to the dopamine as well.
yeah, like you need to look at the objectives along the way and start noticing what's actually happening to you as a response to your pursuit of, in your case it was weight loss. You're getting stronger in the gym, you're more able outside of the gym, you're better at your job, you're getting better sleep, your libido's higher, um, stress is lower. All these things are happening and you don't really see it because you're so focused on the end goal outcome. But there's so much process that's happening and improvements that have nothing to do with the outcome. So if you focus on those things, it'll make you a lot happier along the way, and before you know it, the outcome is going to follow through without you, you know without that being your number one viewpoint.
Absolutely, man. And that lesson from that journey and always loving the journey is something that I learned, along the way. So I take that with me wherever I go, regardless of if it's this, if it's schooling, if it's my job, if it's my life, relationships with family. And that lesson that I learned from that specific time period is very I'm very happy that it happened to me that way, and I'm very happy that that's the mindset that I took from it because it goes across all categories of my life, and it's not just losing weight. You know what I'm saying? So now it's like, oh, you can apply this method to anything that you want to do in life, and
Yep.
that's where I was big, and it wasn't something that I was a fan of, obviously, but it was a blessing in disguise because now I can carry it over into all aspects of my life and be driven with whatever I want to achieve.
Yep. You can see over the maze.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, man. So if people want to get in contact with you, where should they hit you up at?
So I'm on Instagram, Zack Venios _ um, and then I'll throw out my Gmail too. But for I've taken some clients online right now, or not right now. In the future, I will be probably around the new year. So that'll be a way of getting in touch with me. But I would just follow me on Instagram, and I'll put it out there and let people know whenever I am taking clients remote, or if you live in the central PA area, you know, Crunch Fitness, Crunch Harrisburg, Union Deposit Road, come over and we can maybe get some training sessions in there. I always prefer the in person. So
That's awesome, man. Yeah, in person's definitely, you get a better connection with people and you get to actually see what they're doing, things like that. Um, I know that you have a quote prepared for us as well. So, what is that quote?
yes, let me pull that up right now. And I kind of alluded to this earlier in the podcast when I talked about losing being a lesson. But so this one's by Matthew Keith Groves. I heard this first on the Mind Pump podcast. So if you're into fitness, or if you're also a trainer trying to be a better trainer, go check them out. They have a huge influence on the way I do things and the way I view fitness as well. So it goes like this: winners lose much more often than losers. So if you keep losing, but you're still trying, keep it up. You're right on track. So it's all about, the diligence of seeing a plan through, looking at the outcome, taking the negatives, and then rinsing and repeating, making sure that those negatives don't ever occur again. And, it's like the quote, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. If you don't ever try, you're losing. If you try, you're going to get some positives out of it. You're going to grow as a person. And, with fitness, there's never going to be a perfect plan or a perfect time. So don't be paralyzed by, all the information out there. Don't be paralyzed by all the potential outcomes that you're afraid of happening in the process. Just start somewhere, whether it be, just picking one or two exercises to go in and do. You can literally kickstart a whole lot of gains with just one or two things, just treating them as skills, not throwing the whole kitchen sink at yourself right away. Just try, reevaluate, rinse and repeat,
Yeah, just being able to compound those things and being able to take little wins. And even if they're not little wins, even if you set a goal, a measurable goal, you're like, hey, I'm going to lose this much weight in this much time. Maybe you set the goal too high for yourself, and that's okay. Maybe you just fall short of it, but you're a lot further along in the process than you would have been had you never started. So taking that first step is very important for anyone out there listening, and for anyone at all. And I think that's really what that quote speaks to. And Zach, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing all the knowledge and the experiences that you've had in life, man. I think it's really going to be an informational episode for those listening and for those that want to get in shape. And for everyone out there, follow the podcast. Follow us on Instagram at ExcelCast. I'm on LinkedIn as Joseph Parker. Also drop videos on there as well. Do the Q&A below. Do the poll. And as always, stay blessed and excel.
Thanks for having me on,